A group of young men worked like well-oiled gears, passing buckets of water from the bottom of a 100-meter-deep well to the surface in a relay, drawing up the murky water that was their only drinking source. Dozens of salt miners, naked, endured the excruciating pain of their skin being corroded as they harvested salt from the volcanic lakebed. This seemed to be the inescapable despair of the Borana people. Children living here have never attended school because there simply aren't any. Duba's daughter, though only 16, is already considered nearly past the age for marriage in the village, making her the topic of gossip among the older women. Determined to give his daughter a grand wedding, Duba smelled an opportunity. Years of war had led to a severe shortage of salt in the Apali market, 200 kilometers away, where it could fetch a good price. Despite the dangers of the journey, he decided to take a gamble and bought a female camel, knowing it could also provide milk if they became hungry. The Borana people conduct business without much bargaining. With a simple handshake, the deal was done. Duba, along with his 2 sons, set off on their perilous journey, leading 2 camels and a goat. Their first stop was the Asuda volcano, 50 kilometers away, where they planned to buy cheap tobacco. This pitch-black volcanic lake harbors no life, but is rich in salt deposits. Miners, using all their strength, break through the hard bedrock, then dive into the lake to haul up the heavy black chunks of rock by hand. The high salt content makes the lake water dangerously corrosive, and the miners, submerged for an entire day, endure the agonizing pain as the water eats away at their skin. Once the skin ulcerates, it never heals. The miners apply Vaseline to their wounds and cover them with plastic sheets to prevent further infection. To protect their nasal passages from the salt water, they use large homemade plugs to block their nostrils and seal their ear canals with Vaseline before continuing their work. The miners, who constantly enter and exit the freezing water, cannot afford to rest. Payment is based on the number of times they submerge, yet after a day's labor, they earn less than 50 birr. Though surrounded by abundant natural resources, these very resources are also the source of their suffering. With no other means of survival, they must continue diving into the volcanic lake for the rest of their lives, even as their bodies decay and they face lifelong disabilities. Once the salt blocks are collected, they are loaded onto donkeys, each bag weighing between 100 and 200 pounds. The workers transport the salt to the volcano's rim, a task they find invigorating. Duba, with hands roughened by handling the coarse salt, teaches his 11-year-old son how to distinguish good quality salt. Although still rough in appearance, the salt is of the highest grade. Duba finally purchases 100 kilograms for 400 birr, and they continue their journey. The father and sons face at least 5 more days of travel. After a long trek, the youngest son is exhausted. The 3 of them, drained, rest under a large tree for the night. The next morning, they find their water supply nearly depleted. Due to years of drought, the surface water in Borana has completely evaporated, forcing the people to dig deeper wells. The famous Matagi well has been dug over 50 meters deep, requiring a dozen young men to pass buckets up the well wall to a temporary storage pool. The well water, though still muddy, is precious to the Borana people. This valuable water isn't simply drunk, it is rationed, and both people and livestock must pay for it. Despite its murkiness, the youngest son drinks eagerly. With their water jugs filled, they leave the well and prepare to enter the most dangerous part of their journey, a desolate, dried-up lake bed often overrun by bandits. The Borana and Hamar people frequently clash over the grazing lands and water sources in this area. As they tread this treacherous terrain, Duba remains cautious, but the youngest son, exhausted from the day, struggles to keep up. Suddenly, a group of men appear in the distance, causing them to quickly pack up and prepare to flee. Fortunately, the men, armed with AK-47s, are fellow tribesmen patrolling the area to protect passing Borana. After a brief exchange, Duba, still wary, decides not to linger and quickly moves on. They continue for a long distance, finally reaching a rocky outcrop before sunset, where they set up camp for the night. The 3 are so tired that they decide to cook the goat to replenish their strength. This is their first hot meal since the journey began. The youngest son, half asleep, is soon awakened by his father, as they must continue their journey. Before reaching Apolli, they must cross the world's hottest uninhabited desert, the Chalbi Desert. By morning, the temperature has already reached 50 degrees Celsius. The scorching sun beats down on them as they must keep hydrating to avoid heat stroke and reach the desert's edge before sunset, or they may never leave. After 5 days of arduous travel, they finally arrive at the Apolli market. Here, untouched by the ravages of war, even mortal enemies put aside their differences to trade in peace. The market is bustling with vendors selling tomatoes, coffee paste, firewood, and sorghum, but Duba's salt is the most sought-after commodity. A spoonful of salt goes for 2 birr, and it's sold strictly by the spoonful. Despite the high price, customers flock to buy it. Soon, Duba's 100 kilograms of salt are completely sold out. His gamble has paid off. He can now afford to give his daughter a proper wedding. Satisfied, Duba treats his son to a soda and imparts a lesson: live according to the sun. When the sun is high, work hard. When it sets, rest. This has been the fate of generations of Borana people.